name's Eric Braun. I'm the founder of RaleighForward. Since retiring from practicing law a few years ago, I spend most of my time volunteering now. I spent 6 years on the Planning Commission. I also chaired the Transit Committee of the Regional Transportation Alliance when we were supporting the development of the 2016 Wake Transit Plan. Many of you are probably familiar with the BRT plans that the city's working on now, and those really started when the Wake Transit Plan was adopted. Presently, I serve as the chair of the Raleigh Housing Authority, and I want to thank RHA for making this room available to us tonight. That's greatly appreciated. Also like to thank the city and WakeUP, Wake County, as well as RaleighForward for sponsoring the event. Without their support, we would not have been able to make this program happen. I'd also like to thank Jeff Durkin and Catherine Reed, who are with RaleighForward, for their help planning this event. Last but not least, we need to thank Kathleen Richardson and her team. They helped set up this meal for us, and that was not an easy job, and the city, so we appreciate that. Tom Berry, the chair of WakeUp, is here tonight, and so is Roberta Fox. She's the executive director. She's here. Oh, there she is. They've been great partners as we build a new community collaboration model. I have trouble saying that. We believe these kinds of community collaborations among like-minded organizations are the most effective way to educate, inform, and ultimately influence public policy. And speaking of influencing public policy, I think we have at least one elected official, maybe some additional ones in the crowd, if they'd like to stand and just introduce themselves. Megan Patton, thank you for coming. We appreciate it. So thanks for all of you for deciding to spend your evening with us tonight. So why did we do this program? Because when done well, community engagement can build trust and transparency between residents and city leadership. It empowers residents by giving them a voice and a stake in the decision-making process. It strengthens relationships among residents, government, civic leaders, as well as the business community. And ultimately, it improves decision-making, which enhances the quality of life for all our residents, which is really the goal I think we all should have. Each of you should have an agenda. They were at the end of the tables, so by now you should have them. I won't go through the full agenda because you have it, but I would like to go ahead and introduce our speakers tonight. Taisha Mosley is a proud native of Southeast Raleigh with over 10 years of local government experience. Her public sector career has spanned several operational, business development, DEI, and community building roles. She's a first-generation college graduate holding a bachelor's degree in business management from North Carolina A&T State University and a master's of science in social administration from Case Western Reserve University. Taisha is a member of the National Association of Social Workers, the International City-County Management Association. She's a graduate of the UNC School of Government's Municipal and County Administration program. And she currently serves as the Community Engagement Director for the City of Raleigh, where she leads people-focused processes and works to improve the city's overall community engagement efforts. Along with Taisha tonight, we have Nick Vlahos. He's an academic practitioner dedicated to advancing civic decision-making through innovative engagement methods that include digital platforms, local outreach, and exclusive public forums. Inclusive public forums, not exclusive. That would be bad. As Deputy Director for the Center of Democracy Innovation at the National Civic League, Nick spearheads transformative projects such as deliberative study sessions, integrating elected officials with randomly selected residents in city council forums, and mapping national networks for a healthy democracy ecosystem. With that, let's get started. Taisha, why don't you?
Grateful that you're here with us tonight. I know that we're a little bit behind schedule, so I won't be before you too long. I'm just here to share some information at a high level about city government, to tell you about some of the initiatives that we have to get the public involved in our processes and decision making. The real star of the show and the person that's going to capture all your attention tonight is actually Nick. So really excited to get him to come after me. So with that, again, I'll do a brief overview of the city. I will talk about our department and the services that we offer, and then I'll touch lightly on some ways that you can engage with us. The city of Raleigh is a council manager form of government in which most North Carolina cities are. And so I'm asked, what does that mean? Uh, it's simple that the residents elect you all. You all elect the mayor and the council. We have 8 councilors. Again, Councilmember Patton is here with us tonight. 5 of those city council members represent a certain district. There are 2 at-large council members who represent the entire city and the mayor. The council then appoints the city manager. Our city manager is Marshall Adams David. The council also appoints the city clerk and the city attorney. And then after that, the city manager, Marshall, hires all the staff. So there are some city staff here in the room. If you could just raise your hand. So glad that y'all are here this evening. On the city's website, you can enter your address. And when you enter that information, it's going to pull up who your council member is, what district you live in, and ways that you can contact them. All right. So also on that site is email addresses, phone numbers, council staff. A lot of council members also have town hall meetings. They have community meetings for you to bring your concerns directly to them. We have a very active council, and they really encourage the public input of you all. They want to hear what's happening in your neighborhoods. They want to learn about what you're experiencing so that they can help you find and identify solutions to those problems. My computer is not working with us tonight. It's not. It just won't come back to that.
Okay.
Mhm. It's not the same. You see? Mhm. There's something else I should do. I can't advance the slides. Okay, I'll try it now. Thank you. So another way that you can talk to council is participating at city council meetings in our public comment period. Those are the second Tuesday at 7 p.m. or the third Tuesday at 1. There's an online form. Council, it's an opportunity for them to hear from you of matters related to the city of Raleigh. It's not a back and forth dialogue. It's really their opportunity to listen to what your concerns are. And believe it or not, many people don't take advantage of this. And so we always make sure that we share ways in which the community can, again, talk directly to their elected officials. The beautiful thing about local government is that you see the impact right here where you are. And I'll email this to everyone that registered to show you the emails for council staff, the mayor's staff, and then all council members if that's something that you're interested in. And so a little bit about our department. So here's what we do: amplify underrepresented voices, we support local leadership, and we foster strong connections. We have 5 divisions in the community engagement department, over 18 programs and initiatives. That picture right there is from our expo that we had last year out at the McKimmon Center, which I'll talk more about in a moment. And this just shows you how we work. So those five divisions that you see here on the screen towards the bottom are neighborhood services, youth services, our community partnerships, organizational development, and business services. And again, at a very high level, I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. So if someone is brand new to the city, or you've been here for a while and you just haven't gotten as involved, This slide is what I call, putting your toe in the water, right? You're not really ready to immerse yourself, but you're just wondering how you can start. Here's some very simple ways. So we do have an online engagement platform where you can learn about active city projects. The city social media is always a good way just to learn what's going on. Again, if you're not ready to dive into all the things. For those that don't know, you can also sign up to receive text message notifications on topics that you're interested in. Everything from planning and parks and the sustainability, different things like that is all available for you. And then we have tons of boards and commissions where you can either attend a meeting just to learn what they're talking about. I was having a conversation earlier about the Fair Housing Hearing Board, and their meeting yesterday. Or you could apply to be a member of a Raleigh Board or Commission. And so here, as far as the boards and commissions that we have, I won't read them all to you, but they do range in topics, they range in interest. And these are volunteers who do a lot of really, really great work for the organization in the city of Raleigh. We have a platform on our website called Granicus, where let's just say you're interested in serving on the planning commission, like Eric once did. You can see the current vacancies, upcoming vacancies, what their mission is. Our website also shows you the bylaws and the mission statement of these boards and commissions. And this is just, again, a good medium way. So the previous slide was like an introductory. Here are like some medium opportunities for you to also participate. In our department, we have the Citizens Leadership Academy. So that is a 9-week course that talks about leadership development and asset-based community development. Are there any graduates of the Citizens Leadership Academy? Mama Kai, yes, you have a couple. Yes, 3. I like that. Thank y'all. I'm excited. We also have something called the Raleigh Neighborhood Registry. And so right now we have over 300 neighborhoods there. And neighbors can have access to equipment rentals. There's funding available to do different projects in your neighborhood. And it's really a way to like boost involvement with residents and strengthen, that community fabric. Another cool program that we have in the department is called Raleigh Neighborhood College, and that's free classes that give you a deep dive into government. So at the beginning of this presentation, I was talking about council manager, form of government, and the city manager, et cetera, et cetera. This class goes into how you get your water, what your solid waste collection looks like, how operational departments serve the residents of Raleigh. And then we also have Volunteer Raleigh, which is an opportunity for community members to connect with different nonprofits across the city to serve. We have a wonderful program that I'm really excited about called Community Connectors, and that's where we train residents to foster a two-way communication. So the program right now is still in the pilot phase, I would say, but we have 5 residents that you can see on the screen. They are working on the bus rapid transit area. So they have a lot of communications with their neighbors, and they're utilizing their social capital. They bring questions and concerns back to our department and the contact information so that we can then go back to the resident and address their questions. So it's a really cool program there. If you have an organization like RaleighForward is a part of our engagement network, it gives you free space to city facilities to host meetings. Staff can help you create flyers and get information out about your organization, but it's also really cool because it shows you other like-minded organizations not tied to where you live that serve similar purposes for collaboration. Our department also has a community engagement City Hall on the Go vehicle. This is a photo of what our future one's going to look like. But the current one, neighborhoods can request the van to come out to your neighborhood event, and you can tell us, please bring information about the housing plan or the comprehensive plan, things like that. We bring the information to you instead of expecting you to come to us, right? City departments also utilize the van. I think planning's had it at Lowe's or Home Depot to talk to different contractors as they're checking out, right? They see this white van with all this art on it, and they're like having conversations, meeting people where they are. I talked about our expo, and again, that's a yearly conference where we connect residents, departments, community organization, and resources all in the same space. And then our foster grandparents program, we're actually having a banquet on Saturday, and that's aimed at seniors who are 55 and older, and they are foster grandparents to children across Wake County public school systems. And so all of those are just what happens in the community engagement department. There are tons of other of my colleagues here in the room who do different types of engagement and provide the opportunity to hear from you and get you involved in what they have going on. Like the Planning Academy, it empowers you to engage in planning projects that are happening in your neighborhood. Our budget process has an engagement component to it, where we make sure that residents' voices are a part of the development of the budget. And we have several youth initiatives from Youth Council, Raleigh Youth Council. Our digital inclusion program has a unique initiative called Advice About a Device, where we invite our seniors to come in and ask any question about their iPads, laptops, iPhones. And we have youth between 15 and 18 who help them learn about their devices. All right, I made it now to the start of the show. Are there any questions for me before I turn it over to Nick? I know that was a lot. All right, thank y'all so much.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm from the National Civic League, and I'm grateful for everybody to have shown up on this somewhat rainy evening to talk a little bit about things that I'm passionate about, which is civic and community engagement and democratic engagement. And thanks so much to RaleighForward, to the City of Raleigh, and to Wake Up Wake County. So just to get started, we have a tight schedule, so I'm going to try my best to keep on point, but I promise there's going to be a lot of opportunity for you all to chat. In fact, that's the majority of what we're having here is a community conversation. Briefly, the National Civic League is it's a very old organization, as you can see, 1894. It was founded at a time when city government was struggling to make efficient and effective and structures for governing. And so a bipartisan community came together with Teddy Roosevelt and Louis Brandeis to create the National Civic League to provide a model of city government. And so we have what we call the Model City Charter. It's a public resource that's on our website. And you know, at the time we were thinking about democracy of the era, thinking about suffrage and civil rights and things like that. Fast forward to the 21st century, to the modern era. Now we're thinking about that in a little bit of different terms. We'll talk a little bit about that. And that's why we have the Center for Democracy Innovation. And we're here to chat a little bit about that. But before we get started, I just want to show of hands, or just anyone can say it. When you think of democracy innovation, what's the word that comes to your mind? Anybody that has something that wants to say it? Future? Nice. Any others? Participation?
I think with children.
Children.
Citizen voices heard.
Citizen voices heard, exactly. So what we're here to do today is I'm going to give three very short presentations. And so it's crammed content, but I think it's enough here to give you an overview of the things to encourage further learning. And following each one of these, you're going to have a little bit of a group conversation. So what are we talking about today? And what are the learning objectives from my point of view? And I'm looking at you sort of the wheels turning. You lift up the hood of a community or of government. What are we trying to do here? You know, we're thinking about different processes that are parallel to government, processes within government, processes within the community. How can we empower the citizens to have informed and meaningful conversations at these three different levels? And so I'm going to split up the conversation for each one of these. And at the end, I'm going to give you an opportunity to have a live poll in one of our, what we call a civic engagement scorecard. So if you stick around to that, and we can, you can provide a little bit of input on your thoughts on how the community is operating, and we'll do that after. So we'll just jump right in now. So let's just start with, one of the big challenges that we're facing globally, not just domestically, but globally. There is a public distrust in government, and this is something that's been on the decline for many decades. Now, this is nuanced. What I mean is like different levels of government have different levels of sort of interactions and trust. So the local level is a lot more positive than it is nationally. And I will say, I'll provide these slides as well. These are really just a snapshot. So this is a Pew Research poll that shows the trends over time declining, at least federally. It's a little bit different at the local level. So we're at this pivotal moment. We're at this point in time where we should start thinking about what is causing that distrust and what are the ways that we can regenerate that. And so another survey that was recently done by the Yankelovich Democracy Monitor at Public Agenda, and I'm only really briefly trying to touch upon what citizens are trying to say that they want to see more of. And so in this survey that, of 1,000, it was a statistically representative sample. The question was about how percent of Americans who say their local government should or should not implement each of the following systems. And so one was ordinary people vote directly or approve laws or regulations. That's like a referendum, like a citizen initiative, direct democracy. Ordinary people develop ideas for spending tax dollars and then vote on which ideas. That's participatory budgeting. A small representative group of ordinary people appointed to study an issue and make recommendations. We're going to talk about this. That's what you might call a community assembly, a civic assembly, a citizen jury, a citizens assembly. And then ordinary people go online to share solving problems. You can see there's an appetite for different ways of doing things. And I will note that the city of Raleigh is in the process of implementing some of this stuff as well. And so on the flip side of this, the question was when there is an issue in local community that they feel needs to be addressed, percent of who say how each of the following would impact their likelihood to get involved. And so you can see the percentages here. If you and your fellow community members could make the final decision. So one of the things that we're learning from this is that residents, citizens, people of of a community, they want to have more say in things that matter to them. And that's a key component. So how do we design a process like that? And so that's one of the things that we're going to chat about. Just really briefly, has anyone ever heard of a citizens assembly? So I know so there's a few in the room here. Yeah, this is great. Awesome. Familiar face here. Joined us, we had a citizens assembly school in Phoenix, Arizona, and you joined, so amazing. So this is just a really brief high level of what it is. And in fact, I'd say that the United States has a deep history of doing something very similar to this. They have something called the Citizens Jury that the Jefferson Center has been running for like 35 plus years, since the 90s even. And so this model is something that the U.S. is very familiar of, but it's a little bit lagging behind in terms of the amount of applications that the Citizens Assembly model is happening. In any case, there are places, in the various communities that are using it. So what is it? In brief, it's a representative group of residents tasked with learning, deliberating, and making recommendations to some form of convening authority on a specific policy issue. Often it's a contested policy issue, like very contested, because it creates political deadlock. And so, each of these is a phase: learning, deliberating, making recommendations. And so I'll break that down just a little bit. So how are people selected? So you'll see here at the top here, right, say connecting to Parliament. So this was a project I worked on with a member of Parliament in Australia. And that was the invite that went to everybody in the community. It's basically, you get this letter in the mail. Sometimes they're really elaborate. It's almost like a wedding invitation, so you feel like, you're being invited to a very important event. You're encouraged to register your information online, and then you're put through what's called a civic lottery process. And so basically, the lottery process, and what it does is it wants to make sure that the people who show up in the room are representative of the community based on age, gender, race, geography, and then you can start to further filter depending on what you're working on based off of education, income, stances on the political issue sometimes happen. And so what happens is you run a lottery process and you get a bunch of random people, random strangers to come together in a room to work on some project. And so one of the ways that I'm experimenting with is this platform called Panelot. And basically it's a public resource. You can just put in the data and it'll compute a lottery. It'll randomly assign the lottery for you. So there are tools that are being used now available to the public and governments to run their panel selection. So what are the stages? And I kind of briefly touched on this. So one of the most important things of a citizens assembly is you are supposed to, and I call it, pardon me, I'm used to calling it a citizen assembly, but I think, a lot of people will call it a community or a civic assembly. So they're interchangeable. Is to learn something. Your goal isn't to come in with an opinion and to just stick to that opinion. It's to actually learn about a subject from a variety of experts, lived experience experts, technical experts, and you do this over the course of several weekends even, sometimes months. And so it's a commitment. You get paid a stipend to participate in this. And then after you've learned about this subject, you've actually had a lot of questions answered from the experts. The residents, the participants themselves will deliberate together on the pros and cons of said issue. And they're going to come up with a set of recommendations. And those recommendations are going to be agreed upon, not necessarily by consensus, but generally agreed upon with a rationale for why they agree upon that. And then they present that to an elected official, elected body. Now, the elected, and I'll talk a little bit about the complexities of that, but the elected body technically, in most cases, has the authority to take those recommendations and do what they will. But what we try to generally do is have them commit to at least responding within 6 months to the recommendations. Some instances, those recommendations go straight to a referendum. So there's a complete public empowerment process where the citizens will deliberate and the citizens will be the final arbiter of choosing what the outcome is. So what are the pros and cons? One of the pros here, and I broke this down in terms of time, representation, and empowerment. So I think one pro is that, and I guess it could be considered, also a potential con, but time. You have an opportunity now to learn, they call this long form deliberation. You have long periods of time to think about, digest, and settle into an issue and have conversations that might nuance your own opinion. Representation, you're going to actually have different walks of life that you're going to encounter. And if I had more time, I would have showed actual videos of participants on how it's actually, it makes them feel very welcome and part of a different sort of dynamic. And empowerment, you get to make your own decisions without outside political influence. In fact, the Citizens Assembly operates with citizens only. In rare instances, you'll have elected officials part of it. Very rare. It's mostly just citizens making those decisions. The con here is that some people might say that it's costly. 250 grand could be a pretty common cost. There are talks about how we sort of navigate around those. The flip side is, though, is that engagement costs a lot of money, and there are a lot of for-profit firms that charge a lot more money than something like this, and they're not doing nearly as good as a job. Political will, like I said, if it comes down to the elected official implementing it, then there's a question of whether or not they want to. And there are citizens' assemblies where they actually didn't take into consideration at all the recommendations, which really call into question the legitimacy of that process. And then the rarity, because of the costs aligned with it, it's very often, a one-off thing. There are, though, practices where they're trying to create this as a regular recurring mechanism to happen in the community. So why should we use these citizens' assemblies? And I kind of talked a little bit through the pros, but I think, the big thing here is that you want to include the public in a different way, and you want them to examine policies that are very challenging. So you have now an opportunity to allow residents to truly understand the complexities, because that's one challenge I think a lot of people can relate working for government is appreciating the complexities of an issue and really to do a deep dive in this. Another one is to have people make assessments, to actually weigh what it means to weigh the actual pros and cons of an actual item in a very deliberative way. And then to change opinions. And I'm going to jump into the research on this. I think this is a real big one, that you can change opinions and build trust through this process. So what is the actual research on this? So there's a lot of interesting research coming out on specifically how they call them a mini public, a citizens assembly, participatory budgeting, or citizens and referendums are actually changing public attitudes. They're changing their behavior and their capabilities. So if you participate in these processes, you come out of this with a level of self-belief and efficacy where you want to go and now be part of government, where maybe it's going into the engagement department or a board and commission. But it also is creating a different, you start to become more inclined to support a different sort of policy issue and the government because they're hearing you out more. So there's a good amount of research that's on this stuff. And so this is just further, it's just furthering the case for wanting to do this stuff, especially if you're struggling with trust, in government. And not saying that's necessarily the case here. It's happening in a lot of various other communities that may happen. That might be one motivating force. So here's just a few examples. So one was in Petaluma, California, very recently. They were trying to redevelop their fairgrounds, and there's some good information if you want to look up that. 36 people were part of that. They were participating in that for 90 hours, so it was a significant amount of time. Deschutes County just wrapped up theirs, and they were focusing on youth homelessness. British Columbia was the first one of this kind, and they were looking at electoral reform, trying to go to from the single-member plurality to a proportional representation. That actually went to a referendum, and it very narrowly, it almost passed. The challenge there was that the government made it a very difficult task to actually achieve. You can elect the government with 38% of the vote, but they wanted 60% of the vote to change the electoral system. So there was a little bit of complexity there. And then Ireland, this is where I'm saying the complicated political. This is a Catholic country that decided to have a conversation about abortion. And in the end, they ended up approving it and repealing the amendment allowing for it. So it tells you that these types of things are meant for tough questions, and they're meant for people to get in there, and people appreciate the problem-solving component of that. Okay, thanks everybody. I hope you had a great conversation. We got 2 more rounds of that, so plenty more time to chat. So we're going to just jump back into the next theme of conversation here. I just want to give a shout out. Thanks to Mayor Cowell for joining us. Really great for you to see you here. So as I had mentioned, I'm just going back to the first screen where I said these are the 3 things that we're focusing on in the sort of the wheels of engagement. And the next one is how to improve public engagement in official meetings. And so let me pull up this slide. All right. No, that's not it. There we go. All right. So now we're on to the subject matter of contentious meetings and what we can do about those. These are some very familiar, believe me, it did not take me long to pull any of these quotes. It did not take me long at all. And as a matter of fact, you might guess one of these photos is from nearby. Right. So this is not to point fingers in any sort. It's to point out that there are challenges in public meetings, and they happen all over the place. I have conversations with mayors so we're part of large networks like the National League of Cities. And so when we give a talk on public meetings, elected officials in droves come to chat with us about the challenges of public comment. Rochester, Minnesota, in Stanton, Virginia, in Florida, in Texas, all over the place, there are these sort of challenging things. And you can see here that council members are having a difficulty of navigating the contentiousness that are happening, to the point where they're debating whether or not, in some instances, have even taken away public comment altogether. Some instances they have, and that becomes a challenge in itself. So in thinking about that, I'm just going to do a very brief high level of two things here. So we've been working on a project, and I'll talk a little bit about that, called the Better Public Meetings Project. And so just at a high level, for those who aren't as familiar of going to public comment and what it is, you have an opportunity to go and speak at a city council on a topic. Sometimes it's on an agenda item, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's open. But briefly, what it is you'll have, this is just high level, and I'm missing a lot of things, I'm sure of it, but an official body like a city council, even a school board or commission, will hold a public comment period on a specific part of the agenda. The session generally, depending on it, is broadcasted live. And then people sign up to speak. The public can have 2, sometimes 3 minutes to speak, sometimes on a very rare occasion more, depending on the size of it. Bear in mind, though, that the longer you have people speak, the longer these meetings go into the evening. The public use a microphone, or they go up to a podium, and the members are on the dais. Sometimes written submissions are allowed. There's generally no immediate response. I was going to crack a joke, like how many of you could actually have a conversation with your spouse or partner and not get a response, and how well would that fly? You know what I mean? And so this is part of the challenge, right? So sunshine, open meeting laws, rules of procedure. So when you want to start to do a deep dive into what you are and aren't allowed to do, your first thing to go to, what does the sunshine laws allow? That's what is the state laws allow you to actually do? Because you might find it in instances. So here's a good person that's an academic, Lisa Amsler, focuses on sunshine laws, and she'll say that some city councils will want to focus on a specific subject only to realize that the sunshine laws preclude them. So it's always important to understand what the laws are allowing, what they're not. And so generally you'll find I pulled this from, I think, a mixture of maybe Boulder City Council and maybe Mesa's Public School Board, Mesa, Arizona. So you'll have in the sunshine laws, stating like meetings of quorum, anyone where 3 or more, where business is being discussed, meetings where notice is required, meetings that require minutes. But then you start to find some interesting things in there where the chair's responsibility and authority can do things. So this is the direct quote. Study sessions will be open to the public. However, there will be no public participation unless requested by the chair. It gives you that opportunity, though, to actually have a form of public participation. Not included in these items are things that are quasi-judicial that require a more formal setting. So this is all to say that in thinking about this scenario, how would we work within these parameters to develop something that might be useful to city councils in dealing with ruckus meetings? And so one of these, and this is my obligatory Alice in Wonderland here, chasing time. Obviously, everyone is grateful for you all being here tonight, taking your time to come out. A lot of these public meetings happen in the evening. Asynchronous participation. So what do we mean by that? So this is a platform at the top, and it might be difficult to see it. It's called Lakewood Speaks, or any city that chooses it, Raleigh Speaks, whatever. That's how it would be formatted. They post the agenda up in advance of the meeting, and anybody in the community can write a public comment. And what happens is the city council members, or the members that go in, it puts a check mark to show that the council members are actually viewing your public comments. So what they found, Lakewood Speaks, and by doing this, you notice the big dip at 6 p.m. That's where people are not actually making comment on it. They're actually making comment between 10 and 2. There's a big spike. It's showing that people are taking the opportunity out of their day to make comments on items, but not when they're making dinner for their kids. right? So what are the asynchronous opportunities? Can we leverage digital participation? Maybe this is one way to do it, to provide an opportunity for people to make comment digitally. Two-way dialogue. Now this is, I think, a really interesting, in my opinion, this is, I have yet to see anything like this yet. So we worked with Boulder City, Colorado on our Better Public Meetings project, specifically City Council, how to innovate public meetings and the public comment period. We found that study sessions was a good way to actually make a pilot. And so what you're seeing here is an actual official study session. Previously, the community had never allowed the public to participate. It's a fishbowl. You can watch what happens at a study session where the city council learn about it, but the public can't participate. We took away this is actual in chambers. You took away the dais, you took away the podium. All council members, 5 or 6 staff members, and 20 residents randomly selected and half invited from affected communities through a Community Connectors program. They learned about economic vitality. They broke off into roundtables like you all did. They came back to report out. And so it's a completely different way. Now you're not having a two-way microphone, a one-way speaking into a microphone at elected officials who don't respond back at you. Now you're sitting at a table with 2 of your elected officials to talk about the subject matter. A completely different dynamic. No yelling and screaming at all in this scenario. In fact, people were very grateful. Here's what we heard. So when we implemented at the city council meeting what we call a scorecard, just a quick rating system of how the public experienced their interactions in city council chambers during public meetings. So it went from 47.9% to 100% good rating. And so it was a large jump after implementing this. And the reason is that the main things we found is that the public wanted civil dialogue, and they wanted to know how their decisions, how their information is being utilized by elected officials. And so it just allows for a different dynamic between them. And you can see we interviewed council member, staff, and residents, and they all provided. In fact, any sort of challenges that might have come from council, 7 out of the 8 want to actually do it again, and they're going to do their second iteration of that. So the lesson here is, and part of what you're seeing here is a performative aspect. People are going up to the mic. They're not even necessarily trying to even speak to the elected officials, but they're speaking to everyone else to perform to them. And that's a challenge. Open meeting laws allow for more innovation than people realize. I've read tons of them, and they're pretty broad. There's nothing really that scopes anything out from you doing something different if you wanted to. Pilot and give it a chance. It might actually prove to be something useful to your community. You can't just change the format. You got to think about how to bring different voices and people into the room. You don't want just the same 7 people that show up to these public meetings. How do you actually reach out into the rest of the community to come to it? What's another way that you might want to enhance engaging with official bodies? So this is interesting, and we call this sort of going to the people, and I'm sure you do similar things like this. Chats with council, walks with council. One I thought was really cool was this thing called Garage Gab in Saginaw, Texas. Basically, you can invite a council member or city staff or even the mayor to come and have a chat with you in your garage or at the end of your driveway and have a community conversation. The other one here is the People's Assembly in Rochester, where they're basically having community meetings in community centers with elected officials. And here's a bigger one, is the middle one, which is, this is the Senate Mashinani in Kenya. They actually take their whole Senate into a different part of the community, into a different region of the country. Imagine Congress moving to Raleigh and having its meeting. And what they do there is they have conversations with local leaders. It's a fascinating subject to think that you can move your entire Senate into another place. Just a different international example of going to the people. Another way you might want to think about how you deal with the formal civic infrastructure is the city charter. And so, we have the model city charter that we promote. One of the latest models, in the latest model, we're on the 9th edition, is including an article of civic engagement. So let's say you actually went through a charter review process. Maybe you want to think about embedding in that charter different ways you want the public to feel included into specific processes. Now, I'll mention this one fascinating example. This is in Paris. They've created the Paris Local Municipal Assembly has created a formal standing, like an institutionalized version of a citizens' assembly that can then propose themes for participatory budgeting, and then these things go up into the Paris Council. So this is a one-off. It's actually part of the machinery of the government, and they're thinking about how to restructure it to have citizens involved. Okay. So I hope you're keeping account of what you're talking about, because we'll talk a little bit about that after. This keeps falling off. Just leave it off. It keeps falling off. So after this, we're going to have one more round of a group chat after this presentation, and then we'll do a group report out, a little bit of a chat, and then we'll have a live poll. So going to the third subject, how do we think about community participation, neighborhood participation? So I've sort of started with this theme of, like, what's the problem or what's the challenge? So I think this is a pretty interesting map that just recently came up. Can you all hear me good? Yeah? Okay, good, thanks. So this is from the SNF Agora Institute at Johns Hopkins. They just released what they called, they released the report. It's called the Unequal Landscape of Civic Opportunity. And so basically what they did was they took all of the nonprofit organizations in the IRS database, which is I think 1.5 million. They pared it down to $575,000, and then they created a heat map. And what you're seeing here is all the social capital. So this is faith groups, boys and girls clubs. And what they found is that civic opportunity is geographic and it's demographic. It's a fascinating sort of study to showcase where the pockets are. And oops, that was my that was my timer. But they found this. Basically understanding where are civic opportunities and why are there sorts of inequalities in those processes. While that was happening, and we were in conversation with them, our organization created the Mapping Healthy Democracy Ecosystem. So if you can all go to, or maybe I can do it, you can all go to it as well. It's healthydemocracymap.org. Can you see this? Yeah, we can see this. So this is live. I've been inputting thousands and thousands of organizations, and what we're trying to create here is a map of healthy democracy work for anybody to utilize. And what we're hoping is that people will take the list to convene people, right? So you can go into, so like we have about, it hasn't been updated, we have about 10,000, but there's still a lot more that we don't have, and so it's up to the community to help and provide us with some. I think that's part of the roundtable conversation. If you can think of any organizations you want to hand me, and I can put them into the map. But the whole point here is you can start to actually go deeper. What are the groups? And the point of this is we're thinking about community participation, nonprofit participation, neighborhood resident participation. These are some of the democracy orgs that are trying to help your community out. Obviously, we're missing a bunch here, but I mean, we have several of them, and maybe you want to convene or have lessons learned with them. And so this is one tool. It's a public resource. We're defining democracy very, very broadly in this scenario. I might actually have to. I knew it. It's for some reason doing this. Bear with me. So you might not be able to see it, but we have about 12 or so categories. What we're trying to showcase is that democracy isn't just voting, because that's what a lot of people think it is. It's not. It's civic associations, it's voter engagement, it's responsible governance, it's faith-based efforts, it's civic technology. All of these categories are promoting some form of healthy democracy work. And how can you tap into these groups that are doing this work to help promote you into the community? So that's one. Another tool to help build sort of community foundation and networks is something that we released recently, which is what we call mapping your community civic opportunities. And so this is a public resource as well, where basically you can choose a quadrant of the wheel. Let's say you want to focus on the participate quadrant of the civic opportunities wheel. You can start to think about all the myriad of ways. And we just part some of these, like citizen assessments, deliberative public meetings, voter engagement and education. And there's a lot of different opportunities. But as a community, you can just do this as an exercise and come together. What do we have? What do we not have? What do we want to work on? And you can start to map and measure and forward think about the things that you want to do. And so that's another way is mapping, is another way of mapping your sort of civic opportunities in your community. Another form, and I think this will be useful to anybody that's just interested in this type of stuff, is we just released the Rhode Island Action Guide for Improving Civic Health. And so this is downloadable for free. We have this on our website. Basically, it shows you a variety of different ways. This is specifically made for Rhode Island, so like we're inserting what are the different things that are happening in Rhode Island in these contexts. But it'll show you like what are the arts-based strategies, what are the citizen academies, what are the grassroots civic groups, what are the online networks, how can we leverage public space, service and volunteerism. And so these are some other interesting things that I think local groups, like WakeUP, Wake County, or RaleighForward, there are some interesting tools in this that you can start to think about leveraging as well. Now, so I want to jump into a different, I'm thinking about this also in terms of what does sub-municipal governance look like? So you have federal, state, municipal, what's beneath the municipal level? Right? What are the different versions of governance that happen below that, in between community or residents and government? And so I'll have 3 or 2 or so models that I think are interesting. So this is the Federation of Calgary Communities, and it's you maybe have something familiar to something like this in Raleigh, but in any case, the Federation of Calgary Communities is a public body that supports 230 nonprofits, and they provide resources. So it's a centralized resource. So you know how some nonprofits, they might struggle with templates, or they might struggle with setting up websites. This is a centralized resource to provide local nonprofits with supports and sometimes even grants to run specific projects. And so that's an interesting way. And they convene people across the 230 nonprofits together as a lessons learned. So we want to think about how can we strengthen social capital from the ground up to fill in those pockets of civic opportunity that are missing. How do we support them? How do we provide them? And this is one way, it's a centralized hub of some sort. Now here's another one, a different sort of model, community boards or neighborhood councils. Now, these are contested and they're challenging sort of forums, but they're interesting. Sorry, I'm not looking, but I'm trying to navigate here. But so we have community boards in New York. And so it's interesting, in New York has 5 borough councils. The borough president is elected by the public. Then you have 59 community boards within each borough, which are made up of residents. And they get to sort of join public meetings And also within the borough councils or in the boroughs themselves, they have participatory budgeting. So the public can actually spend money in public dollars. And so the Borough Assembly Committee model here that I'm showing is just the New York Civic Engagement Commission basically. They ran a citizens assembly combined with a participatory budgeting model. The residents came together and decided what they wanted to run, and in all 5 boroughs, basically you have 5 boroughs come together, residents saying, we want to spend money on this, 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 and this. The assembly came together and studied all of these ideas to create recommendations, brought those back to the community boards, and then they all voted on them to implement in the community. So it's a very grassroots sort of thing. And the other one is in Los Angeles, they have what they call neighborhood councils. These are formal neighborhood councils. There's 99 of them. They're significant. I mean, it's a large place, right? Each of them gets $30,000 to $40,000 to spend in community grants and community initiatives. And then at the end of the year, they have an annual council of neighborhoods, and the council of neighborhoods brings together people from every one of the councils themselves to have lessons learned and think about possible collaborations. So, like what I'm trying to point out here is, what are the ways we can think about different forms of community bottom-up governance? Now, the challenge is that a lot of these, they're not perfect. The reality is that the community boards are not perfect by any means. You can have underrepresentation depending on the community board. Some community boards actually have no resources in New York. Sometimes the borough council president is politically aligned, and then they focus specifically on politics. So there are challenges. But I think as a formal infrastructure, what are the different ways that we can make it better to actually involve the residents? And so we can start to think about sub-municipal levels of governance. And so I mentioned I was going to talk a little bit about digital crowdsourcing. And so here's a few tools. You all have seen Mentimeter. I put this at a poll. What does democracy innovation mean to you? It's just a live poll. You can do this in any meeting. It's free, and it's easy for you to actually just crowdsource ideas. But some of the more interesting ones, and we mentioned Be Heard Boulder. So the bottom one here is an example of how Cortico takes conversations from small roundtables, 6 people at a time, and it plugs it into their platform, and it generates themes. And you can notice the themes that arose from this conversation. I was talking about the homeless, poor, students, and each one of those sections there is an actual recording. So not only are you hearing themes, you're actually hearing the people's voices. So it's a very interesting way to think about how you're documenting people's voices and creating these artifacts of what their conversations are about. And the top right is Polis, poll.is. And so this is an open source tool. It's free. All you need to do is take the code and embed it into your website. But it's a crowdsourcing platform where you can ask a question. Maybe it's for your comprehensive master plan. You take Poll.is. What do you want to do about this specific park space? People will start putting ideas, ranking the ideas, and debating them. And then it starts to group the pockets of where the actual ideas and groupings are forming. And it tells you, for example, 56% of group 1 agreed that they like this idea. So that's a free resource, and I really think that Poll.is is a great, should be leveraged a lot more locally, because it's open source. It doesn't require anything. So what are some other tools that grassroots groups use? And this comes from a little bit of research that I've been doing. I've interviewed 15 grassroots organizations to sort of understand how do they use digital tools. And one of them here I thought was fascinating, is that Friends of Chinatown is using virtual reality and augmented reality in partnership with an architecture firm to engage seniors. And so they're having seniors think about park space, visualizing it with virtual reality, so they get to play with it and provide user feedback on it. It's just a different way to engage the public that's fun. Another one is participatory documentary of lived experiences. So the Neighborhood Centers group they're teaching communities how to film, edit, narrate documentaries of their communities, and then showcase those in their different communities. Another one is mutual aid hotlines. I think this is fascinating. I'm sure you have tons of mutual aids as well, but the creation of hotlines to help people that might be immunocompromised or that just might be, need medication or something delivered is building social networks through online marketplaces and mutual aid networks. And the last one is, I don't know if, do you all have community land trusts here? So you're familiar with this. I think that this is such an interesting mechanism for a community finding the funds to take land out of the market and purchase in perpetuity to provide affordable housing, and the governance structure is democratic. It can become bureaucratic the larger it becomes with the more units, but the principle of governing that housing authority is a really interesting thing in a lot of communities.